Chapter 10. The Elephant in the Room. The quote is, "It's all in how you look at it." Proverb. So, in the last few chapters, we went over some new ways of looking at things. We tried to think of spirits as time travelers and the afterlife as being in the future. The key thing here is that this is a new way of looking at things, a way that begins to merge science and spirituality. And isn't that what we have always felt should be the case? After all, why should science and spirituality be at odds with each other? Either both were created by God, or both are run by physical laws. But we've gotten so used to thinking of these two things as opposing each other that it's almost taboo to try and combine them. But maybe it's time. And so we're going to need to talk about the elephant in the room. A different kind of elephant. So, what is the elephant in the room? What's the big, obvious, awkward thing that we're not talking about? Well, don't worry. It's not that kind of elephant. It's not an awkward subject elephant. No, this is a different kind of elephant. There is an old parable about an elephant and some blindfolded men, and that's the kind of elephant we're dealing with here. In this parable, a group of blindfolded men go into a dark room and each man reaches out and touches the elephant, trying to figure out what it is. Each man feels a different part of the elephant. One man touches a tusk, another touches a leg, another touches its ear, and each man then uses his past experiences to try and figure out what the thing is, based on these few touches. The men leave the room and exchange their opinions on what was inside. And of course, each man has come to a completely different conclusion. So, after going over all of the ideas put forth in this book so far, is it possible to think now that scientists and spiritual people have been in a big, dark room, blindfolded together? Looking at the same things from different perspectives, each encountering different bits and pieces of the same complete truth, using different names for many of the same things? I think so, because near-death experiences and space-time wormholes and ghosts and time travelers aren't the only things that sound the same these days. As new information about our future comes to light, it's starting to sound a lot like heaven. Heaven is in the here, after. Spiritual beliefs state that there's a place out there where people are young and immortal. A beautiful place full of super intelligent entities with incredible wisdom and knowledge. So advanced that normal humans can't even comprehend it. And these beings are really interested in us. They look over us through space and time, but they have to be sneaky and hands-off with how they do it. And when we die, they pull our minds through wormholes in space-time and put us into awesome, brand new bodies in a heaven. And now, science is telling us such a place exists as well. Scientists now tell us there is a place where people are young and immortal, a beautiful place full of super intelligent entities with incredible wisdom and knowledge, so advanced that normal humans now can't even comprehend it. Science even has a name for this place. It's called the future. And what if we add in the theory behind technological resurrection? Then we can also say that these beings are really interested in us. They look over us through space and time, but they have to be sneaky and hands off with how they do it. And when we die, they pull our minds through wormholes in space-time and put us into awesome, brand new bodies. Seriously, yet another coincidence? And why have so few people noticed this? I mean, people even sometimes call the afterlife the hereafter, which literally means the future. So why have we never thought about this before? Why have we all watched movies about time travelers being mistaken for angels and yet not once thought, hey, wait a second, maybe? Well, there are a few good reasons. Our cups were full. First of all, no one thought technological resurrection was possible. And in fact, it wasn't really a concept. Time travel, interdimensional travel, these are concepts we were all familiar with. We watched shows about these concepts like Doctor Who, Family Guy, and Rick and Morty. You can probably go online and even buy a shirt that says time travel on it in big red letters. But technological resurrection? Almost no one alive has ever heard those two words spoken together. So when people said they saw ghosts, it literally never occurred to anyone that they might be beings visiting from the future. Of course not. If our mother died, and then we saw her ghost standing at the foot of our bed the next day, the last thing we would think was that she was visiting us from the future. So, the only assumption left would be that these encounters were from another dimension, a spiritual dimension, or a plane of existence. And second of all, this is what billions of us are taught in our religions. And this concept is constantly reinforced in our movies and literature. It's like that old Zen Buddhist story. A man went to a Buddhist master and asked him to teach him. The old master started pouring him a cup of tea. But to the man's surprise, the master kept pouring until the cup overflowed. The man yelled at him to stop, but the master just shook his head and said, "I cannot teach you yet, because you're like this cup right now. You are already full. Empty your mind and come back to me with an empty cup, and I will fill you with the knowledge you are seeking." And this is perhaps why the ideas in this book are so hard to contemplate for many people. This is probably why these different interpretations hid right in front of us. Just think about it. Time traveling, interdimensional superintelligence from a spiritual dimension? Sure. People are all over that. That has been poured into the cup of our minds from the time we were born. But suggest that these beings are from our future? That thought just rolls off the top. Good thing my mind was so empty when the thought occurred to me, I guess. Anyway, there is also another reason why right now is probably the first time this idea could be considered at all. You see, this is also the first time in history where the future sounds like heaven, isn't it? 1,000 years ago, people thought the farthest technology could advance was to make a really strong sword. We're the first people to realize that technology is going to allow us to do all of these things once reserved for gods and heavens. A razor, darkly. But let's talk about Occam's razor for a moment. Occam's razor is an old problem-solving principle, a rule of thumb. It states if there are two explanations for something, the simpler one that makes more sense is the one you should choose. The one with the fewest assumptions, essentially. So, let's break out a little shaving gel, some hot water, and Occam's razor, and let's see if we can't cut through our little problem here. We have three options for the fact that throughout history, a majority of people have reported all of these secretive spiritual encounters. Everyone is crazy and or lying. There are interdimensional spirits, or there are interdimensional time travelers. So which is it, according to Occam? The first. They're all crazy. Now this is a simple explanation, true. And the news these days makes it seem pretty likely, I admit. But it doesn't really make much sense. Because if almost everyone who has ever lived was this crazy, I have a hunch mankind would not have survived. And it takes a certain amount of arrogance to insist that almost every human who ever lived was delusional. I don't know if we should do that. Not unless we eliminate all other options. 2. They are beings from another dimension, a spiritual dimension. This idea is simple as well, and it would make sense, except for one thing. Why be so secretive? What would change if ghosts and spirits appeared to everyone? Nothing. We just believe in them more than we already do. This huge, glaring problem complicates this idea. It's a wrench in the gears that just won't go away. It makes this simple idea suddenly very complicated. 3. They are interdimensional time travelers messing with stuff. Now, this idea is simple as well, and it makes sense if we allow for the possibility of this technology ever existing. So much sense, in fact, that if we watched a movie about a time traveler who wasn't sneaky, we'd be like, that doesn't make any sense. If he did that, then how did he exist in the first place? Rubbish. So ultimately, technological resurrection and all that it implies about our world doesn't make the universe make less sense. It makes everything make more sense. And according to Occam and his razor, we should proceed as if this is what's going on. And if you don't agree, don't blame me. Blame Occam. He's the one with the razor. In conclusion, so for the last few chapters, we've been looking at the world through the lens of a new idea. We've emptied our mental cup for a moment and tried a new flavor of figurative tea. And basically, we've been exploring a scientific hypothesis for what has until now been thought of as a purely spiritual phenomenon. And this new interpretation of our universe has worked out pretty well. It means that we don't have to believe that almost everyone who has ever lived was either delusional or full of crap, while at the same time, we can still embrace ideas like science, logic, and reason. This new hypothesis also fills in some of the blanks that spiritual beliefs couldn't. Why are these events hidden and invisible? Why are these powerful beings so limited in what they can do here? And why does there seem to be so many different and conflicting spiritual events and beings? I'll explain if we think about these beings and events as being from technologically advanced future timelines. And ultimately, this new interpretation means that if we were looking for evidence of time travelers and temporal engineering to support our new ideas on technological resurrection, then there is an absolute glut of it. So, after all of this, it's clear that this is an interesting new way to interpret the universe. Many of the same concepts and ideas, but with a small change. A change that incorporates what we see in our world now, technology, with spirituality, as opposed to ignoring it. But beyond what is possible, another idea is just as important. How probable is all of this? I mean, do we see anything in our world right now that makes it probable temporal resurrection technology will be invented? And that's the end of chapter 10. Next video, we cover part 3, A New Future, and chapter 11, Possible or Probable.